2008, I started working directly with Rosenstein in Baltimore. And because of the access, many other agencies, FBI, for instance, would come for corroboration of something they were working on, or just to ask questions if I'd seen something like this, if this related to anything. And it grew from there. Because of the undercover nature of many of the investigations I worked on, terrorists or things like that, domestic terrorism within the country, they kept me fairly well concealed, and access was limited to a certain group headed by Rob Rosenstein. This became known as the Dirty Trick Squad in Baltimore. This is where they were using hammer, sunrise, sunset, things like that, to illegally spy on people, attempted to corrupt judges, compromise them, Hillary Clinton, others. I mean, it was just ongoing. They concentrated on judges, but they wanted to concentrate on this. It was done under the guise of a CSIPS operation. It's a DOJ CSIPS computer operation. It was run out of Fort Washington, but at a satellite location in Baltimore. And it would illegally compromise people, illegally wiretap, break into computers, plant, reverse, change information, change emails, things of that nature. And it was in this capacity of working with them that the information about the judges and Roberts and Pence and things like that have come out. I've tried several times in the past to get it out and was thoroughly squashed by Rod and the DOJ and the FBI to a horrible extent. I tried to get in 2015, tried to end run them and go to the Department of Homeland Security. And once it got, I went there with a pile of evidence and some video and audio recordings. It got too large for them, I suppose, but it made its way back to the FBI and DOJ, and they came down on us again. This was 2015. In 2016, I made a video discussing quite a bit of this in an effort to get it to Devin Nunes, who was the head of the House Intelligence Committee at the time, but there was interference from one of the people involved. He messed that all up, so it went largely unnoticed. But on the video, I tried to warn President Trump about the people that he was dealing with daily, and especially Rod, Pence, things like that, as they were working together to remove him, trying to compromise the people around them, get dirt on anyone they possibly could.
Now, how were Rod Rosenstein and Mike Pence connected?
That group, I mean, they're all interconnected in one way or another. That particular group was Rod, VP Pence, Paul Ryan. That was the core of that group. Roberts was in there, but that was the core of it, and it was an attempt where Rod was the brilliant legal mind behind it to remove President Trump under the 25th Amendment. They actually had an operational name for it at the beginning, Run Silent, Run Deep, but nobody really used it after a while. It didn't make any sense because it was such a small group. But that's an old movie about somebody being passed over for promotion, which they both felt they were. VP Pence hated President Trump because he had taken his slot as rightful president. He felt that he did. And Paul Ryan was actually considered running as well for a vice presidential slot, and Mitt Romney was also involved. But they thought President Trump was an outsider who had not paid his dues. They just didn't like him. So once VP Pence was in there, once President Trump was elected, and obviously Vice President Pence, he just walked away, and everything became very quiet. That was their mole inside, someone who could run interference, leak certain things, and just keep tabs on the president, manage him.
So was this a friendly relationship between Mike Pence and Rosenstein, or was there any kind of leverage being placed on the president or the vice president at the time?
There was leverage on Mike Pence because of surveillance from way back in the 2013 range that they had gotten FISA warrants to exploit, and Rod had that. He wanted a vice presidential slot himself. If they could remove President Trump, Vice President Pence becomes president, and Rod felt that he would be the natural selection for it. Paul Ryan felt differently, as did Mitt Romney, but That was the overall goal. Each one of them vying for the vice presidential slot. Rod thought he was the clear winner because of his legal brilliance and his management of the Mueller investigation and special counsels and things. He would be the one to remove the president, damage him so thoroughly he could be removed, and he deserved it.
Do you know what type of leverage would have existed over the vice president?
The vice president has had homosexual relations in the past. It's not a problem. Many of them were adults. This is something he had done throughout his time in Congress. When he became governor, he had thought that he was free to explore them more. There were two specifically that they had recorded. One gentleman, roughly 20 years his junior, they had a fairly steady relationship. There was one about half his age. It was much more sporadic. It's considered because it was more dangerous, harder getting time alone. This person would introduce others. He'd bring people with him. He'd have people waiting when he showed up. And it was that second one that introduced younger and younger people. This is whomever, he's 17, he's really 15. Whomever he's 15, he's really 13. And Rod and Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, a lot of the younger people involved, the ones that were brought as favors, were supplied by Jeffrey Epstein's channels, through his channels, his people. They were able to get FISA warrants because one, of course, Chief Justice Roberts had the FISA court and helped them prepare them, but it was also Epstein was an intelligence asset of some type to various agencies around the world. They used his information, they exploited it for their own good. So when he was here, or his people were here, it was easy enough to justify a FISA warrant on them. I would enact a warrant, surveil everything, document it, but they would not help anyone. They would not save the child. They would not, reveal it. It was more important for them to have the leverage on everything. And of course, this is under their own corrupt ideas, but under Rod, his tutelage, and they wanted the leverage.
All right. So I'm going to ask you if we could get into some more of the details with the Dirty Trick Squad and how Rosenstein was a part of that group, and if Roberts had any type of interaction with the group as well.
Dirty Trick Squad, it was just a nickname. Certainly wasn't anything official. It was a group of people that were either dirty or they controlled. I was one that was controlled. There was Rod, Sean Henry, his FBI, Sean Bridges, Secret Service, Rosati, Joseph Rosati, who was the DEA, Alan Borishock was ATF, Greg Utz, who was the TFO with the DEA, but he was formerly Baltimore County Police. This was the basis of the Dirty Trick Squad. The computer experts, you had the muscle, you had the technical experts, and that's what they were doing. And then there was another group in Fort Washington who was running one down there. This was a satellite location in Baltimore just for the really illegal stuff, illegal communications, hacking, phone tapping, you name it. And those people involved, they concentrated their main focus all the time, Title III judges, federal judges. But they would go after anyone, political rivals, sitting politicians, anybody they needed to go after, anybody they were pointed at. They went after family members of judges and compromised people as much as they possibly could. They had no problem hacking computers and planting information to compromise people. This is something they had done numerous times. Rod had done this for years and years, so had Sean Bridges, where they would finagle a case that they had before the court where, for instance, they would arrest a gentleman and he had money, he had property and something, he had the resources to fight them. They didn't like that. So Sean would go in, plant child porn on their computer, and what do you do? Oh, an examination, now you got this on there. I don't know anything about it. Well, it's on there, we're gonna charge you. And then he didn't want that. It ruined his life, didn't want to go to prison as a pedophile, you know what happens, and things like that. And they would use this as leverage in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. And then he would plead person they charged would plead to a lesser charge that would not show up on the record, but he would have to forfeit property, money, things like that. And they would skim their percentage off. Sean Bridges was particularly good at it. It was his specialty. And he had done this at the county and state level. That's why he got in trouble a couple times, which is why he came under the sight of Rosenstein, who got him up to federal. Sean did not like Obama, didn't like Hillary. He had access to the White House, the Air Force One, CIA, NSA. He had those kind of clearances. He's the #1 expert on the forensic study of the computers for the Secret Service and for most of the government.
You know, was he a government employee or was he a contractor?
He was Secret Service. He was a Secret Service agent.
Okay.
A full Secret Service agent. So he had access to all these things, but because of his clearances, because of his expertise, he could go anywhere. He was often in the White House, texting the location of the president, Obama, what they were doing. He hacked Obama's BlackBerry just for fun, things like that. Shared messages with people, hacked the girls' phones. I mean, it was nothing for him. He had lists of people that he would just call up and watch them do their daily stuff. He's just truly gifted with the computers. I'm good at the computers. I can do any of it you need, but he's just one of those people born to do it. He can do it like breathing. He's a violent person, which belies his size. He's only about 5'9", 5'8". He's maybe 120 pounds when he's not drinking. But he is a violent person and arrogant. He's all about the money. This was the core group of the Dirty Trick Squad, and that's all they did was hack people, steal information, alter emails, manipulate things, and sell intelligence, launder it. Sean Wesley Bridges, the Secret Service agent, was the foremost expert on e-commerce and Bitcoin. That's what he's actually in prison for. And their illegal profits that they would skim off, or they would target people with cash or different bank accounts. Anything they could skim, they would run it through Bitcoin. He'd launder it for them. And he still holds millions of dollars online in various accounts. He also holds several passports and will disappear as soon as he's released.
Do you know where he'll disappear to?
Central or South America. He's discussed Argentina and Colombia as possibilities because his wife's family is from there. They have family there. He was able to purchase legitimate passports and documents from governments in South America. But he has the money to do so. So he's all about the money.
Okay. Can you tell me about Alan Borshak?
Borshak, he's an ATF. He's retired now. He's a nasty piece of work. He was involved in his official capacity with the illegal gun running for Fast and Furious. He was the one that made sure the paperwork stayed clean if things came back in the country. They're spying guns, supposedly that would be tracked, and he made sure things stayed clean with as far as serial numbers, things like that. He's been dealing guns his entire career, as far as I know. He has lots of disposable money at his disposal. He has lots of cash at his disposal, and things like that. He lives very well. When Rod started falling out of favor as the DAG, they felt that their Rosati, Borshak, they felt that their protection was leaving. So Borshak and Rosati both divorced their wife, no contest, put everything in her name, paid off their existing house with, I think Rosati was over $300,000, Borshak was even more in cash. Bought another house with like $250,000 in cash down payment. Lived there. This is Rosati. Lived with his wife. They just divorced.
When you say cash, you mean by transfer or by hard cash?
They actually had cash
Okay.
to pay off things, and were able to come up with large checks as well. But he lived with his wife. He's always had cash. If you look at him on the surface, he's a barely getting by DEA agent who owes money to several people.
Is this Rosati or?
Rosati.
Oh, okay. Continue with Borshak. We'll get into Rosati in a second.
No.
Yeah.
No,
Keep them straight.
Borshak, gotcha. Borshak divorced his wife same time as Rosati. Paid off the house. Gave her about $600,000 as part of the settlement. Put everything in her name after paying off the house in cash. Bought a large condo on the Potomac for himself. has a custom van filled with road race bikes that he likes to bicycle. These are all 10, 12, $15,000 bikes that are custom made for him, his size are measured and everything. It's just one of his hobbies. He's got watercraft and cars and all kinds of stuff. Well, never has a problem finding cash. And because he's dealing guns and helps people clear up stuff that is out there. So, he helps supply the firearm for Seth Rich.
Okay, very good. So now on to Rosati, Joseph Rosati. Let's discuss. I know you've got a little bit more information about him than some of the others. So
Rosati is a DEA steroid freak bodybuilder. He's like 6'2" or so, but a big bodybuilder. He's a violent, nasty, lying person. He always has been. It's not just me saying it. This is other people that he's worked with. Other agents have complained about the same thing. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of cases where he has added drugs to things. There's an instance where there's one drug case, there's 15 agents involved, and the only complaints in the case were from the people being arrested were about Rosati, and the exact same complaints from the agents. He always had to be the one to swoop. He never did any work. He's always the cowboy, had to be out on his own, but he was always the one to swoop in with the big bust. You know, the 14 agents would find 30 pounds of marijuana, and he would swoop in all by himself with no record, and I got a kilo of coke, and make the big bust. And they complained. Agents on numerous cases in numerous locations would complain about him doing this. He's also been sued many times by people who flat out said, I'm a drug dealer, I sell marijuana, I never touched the other stuff, it's all I've ever sold, I believe in it. But he added it to it. I mean, the exact same complaints over and over again from not only defendants, but agents working with him. And when things would get too bad, they would just move him off into another region, another district. He's a nasty, violent person that I personally had to deal with.
Now, you've mentioned in a previous tape that he and Borshak were involved with the Seth Rich murder. Are there any other murders that you know of or have heard that he may be associated with? And if so, how were those perpetrated?
Yeah, Borshak was involved. He supplied the firearm, made it disappear afterwards, got destroyed. Rosati was involved with the Seth Rich. He was there, and he's the one who picked up the MS-13 people outside the city and brought them in when he got them out of the city. He brought Kevin Darty with him. Kevin Darty was kind of a hang-around, wannabe federal agent. Sucked up to them continuously, hoping to get an appointment. He's a big wannabe, always had a different story about his background. He's apparently did almost a year in the Marine Corps many, many years ago. But they used him as kind of a gopher. And he was there that night. Kevin Darty is actually the one who attempted to kill Jack Berkman later on because he's being exposed in the crime. And he's in prison for that now. So they've been involved in other murders. This is Borshak and Rosati. They're very tight. They would do things where they would of course, selling guns to gang members. Later, resulted in murders, deaths, and they would call it fishing. They would sell them off. Sometimes they didn't leave them there. They would come up. It's very easy for them to come up with firearms. They would sell them off, and then Borshak would trace the serial numbers and see if it was related later on down the road to any shootings or deaths. It was fishing. That's how they call it, fishing, and see if they got one. Because to them it was great.
Is this similar to the Fast and Furious idea?
Yeah, it was just their version of it.
Just a local version? Or?
Yeah, it was their version, same time, same time frame what they were doing. But they would track the serial numbers just to see if they got one, if it had been used in a crime or at one point I thought they were even keeping score, but they would just celebrate that. They just thought it was funny that they made the money and they killed each other and great fun.
You mentioned Rosati has been known to use poisons on people.
Yeah, he's been known to help people overdose, give them hot shots, pure drugs to shoot them, to kill them, to overdose them. He's done this to informants, things like this that he's used. And he's done it several times, as far as we know, that he's bragged about. informants, because he'll have informants, and then he'll start dealing with them. He'll start dealing drugs with them. He'll start moving products to them, especially pills. And then when they think they have enough leverage on them, they come back and have something. Well, they'll just set them up, they overdose, and they're gone. So, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that he's also involved in pharmaceutical, pharmacy fraud. And
Pharmacy, yeah. This is the pharmaceutical. I don't think he's got the brain for it. He, as a DEA agent, he used his authority to manipulate pharmacies and shipping and inspections. DEA inspects pharmacies once a month, especially the narcotic shipments. Generally, the pharmacies are divided on all the medications that over here are narcotics, and they're supposed to be inspected. Well, he would oversee the inspections. He would write them off if they had more, if they had less, and he would move them through there. He could sign off on it, and everything looked fine. The numbers match up, they accounted for everything, and yet they got 30,000 more pills sitting there because they're selling it for him. And they did all kinds of stuff. They would short prescriptions, but it was just the pharmacies ordering these massive amounts of opioids that he was working with, and he would take them and sell them on the street, sell them to another pharmacy, move them through another pharmacy, and get paid for it. And he was manipulating their inspections. That's what he's doing there. And then when, again, they became problematic or didn't want to do it anymore, or felt they were too exposed, or local police had come to their door because they'd heard something, he would, boom, I don't know, I'm DEA, and he would distance himself and shut them up, threaten them, and go that way.
You mentioned he had a cousin that looks similar to him.
Oh, yeah, I mean, he'll do anything for money. He's a piece of crap. He's a large guy. He's like 6'2" or so, and a big bodybuilder. He has a cousin that looks almost like him, but he's skinny, just the face. Cousin, this is little stuff. The cousin would go into banks, and with his ID, with his real ID, he'd give it to him. He'd go in and open up bank accounts, credit lines, things like this. They'd max him out, just ruin it. Bounce checks, credit cards, everything they could possibly get. Then when it finally hit the fan and the bank started collecting, or the credit agent started collecting, he would go into the bank as a DEA agent and say, "Who opened this account?" And it was like, "Well, this is me. Here I am." It was like, "Am I the one that opened it?" And they're like, "Well, no, you're enormous. Obviously, I remember you." And then it goes away. It wasn't him. He's done this lots of times. He had another scam where he actually got other agents shot because of this one, where he was calling as a phony DEA agent, calling people around the country randomly and telling them that a package had been intercepted and it had your name on it. It's drugs, or it's drug precursors, things like that. It's not in the country yet, but it's coming. If it gets to the country, I'm going to charge you. Well, if you pay a fee, a fine now, $1,200, $800, whatever, it'll never get here. And he got lots of people to pay him. But a lot of people would contact, a lot of people were like, "Oh, I'm not doing that." And they contacted the DEA. And it turned out he was actually the DEA's point man on those complaints. So he was running the scam that if anything came back, it went to him anyway. But he did eventually get caught on that because this is a nationwide scam. People all over the country doing this, because the 3 numbers he used to do these calls went to the payphone outside of where he worked, the payphone at the gas station about a block and a half from his house, and to a burner phone he was known to use. So not so smart. And then a few of the people were able to record the conversation on the phone as evidence. They had an app or something. And then when they called and it got switched around, everybody was like, "It's the same guy." They're like, "Holy crap!" It was like then they really didn't know what was happening. But because of that, because of the phony DEA people trying to make these phony arrests, there were actually real agents enacting a high-risk warrant in California who got shot. The guy just, as soon as they have a warrant, they identified themselves, he just fired them up because he had heard about the phony agents. And it was because of him. He got his own agents shot and doesn't care. So that's how he is.
Okay. Final thing on Rosati. You've mentioned before that he's worked with local mafia people in the Maryland area. Conowingo Pizza has been mentioned in the past. Can you give any more details about how that works?
Okay. You get in a whole new realm of stuff to worry about. Yeah, he protects certain people who can provide him with what he needs or money. This is a relationship he's had for quite a while. It's Conowingo Pizza on Route 1 in Cecil County, Maryland. It's a small place. Calawingo is not very big at all, but it's run by Little Tony, Anthony, his father, Big Tony, who is connected to the mafia in New Jersey and New York. He runs Pizza Place, but Little Tony owns everything up there. He owns stuff on Route 40 all the way out. He owns millions and millions of dollars in real estate that he gets rent and everything off of. That all came from drugs. Rosati has worked with him for many years. So have the local police up there. And he's just not touchable. But this is his steady supply, his steady source. They bring in drugs once a week. They bring in dough from New Jersey, and one of those trucks, it varies which one, but one of those is drug shipment. And it's brought in, broken down, and taken out. It's like once a month. And there's a lot. You're talking hundreds of pounds of drugs broken down. Many of it, a lot of the heroin that's brought in, could be a couple hundred pounds of heroin is actually broken down, taken down into Baltimore and DC.
Yeah, mostly a heroin dealer then?
It is now. It used to be more coke, some pills, things like that, but the heroin has jumped way, way up. And it's predominantly heroin at this point.
Now, is Rosati just running protection for them? Is he moving things for them, or what's his role in that specific operation? You know,
he can give them intelligence.
Okay.
That's the big thing. If somebody is talking in Baltimore, DC, he can let them know, or Maryland. He provides intelligence. He gets paid. He can provide them whatever he needs. If he comes up on a bust or something, because he's always skimming stuff, then he can move it through them. They'll gladly take care of what he comes up with. They were helping him previously when the big opioid crisis was going. He was coming up with 20, 30, 40,000 pills, opioid pills of one kind or another during a month. 1 month, they helped him move it because he had pharmacists that were working with him in Maryland, ones that he was protecting, and they set up a softball thing. They set up non-profit groups to launder all this money. But when he was just getting so much, 30, 40,000 pills, they had to move there. I mean, he needed their help to move that kind of stuff. But he provides intelligence to this day.
Okay. Now, with this group you've just described, actually you mentioned one other Sean, an FBI guy, Sean Henry. He's just nasty. He's involved up to his eyeballs. He was dirty tricks. He was nasty. He's a lot like Strzok. Thinks he's a computer expert. Had no problem sending information to any foreign government that would pay. He's all about money. He's a CrowdStrike now. He's nasty. He's just a complete criminal with a badge. He's not FBI now, but he's still connected to them. Still helps him certain things, but he is flat out criminal. Okay. Now, was there any specific tie-in with Roberts to this group, with the things that they would do for Rosenstein? Was this group involved in any of these plotted murders of the Supreme Court justices that you know of, or local judges?
They provided evidence, I won't say evidence, they provided intelligence from illegal surveillance of one kind or another to the FBI people, to Sean Henry, who would take it to these FBI insiders, these false flag people who had infiltrated the groups. So they're getting it from both sides. Robert certainly knew about it. He helped with FISA warrants, anything that was connected to it. He knew about that side, of course, because he wanted a say in who he would replace, would be replaced. But they would, Roberts wasn't really involved with the day-to-day nitty-gritty of the Dirty Trick Squad, because it was just day in, day out, constantly, non-stop. And it wasn't just all in Baltimore. They would drive around, do war driving, things like this, when they had some really nasty stuff to do, like with Cheryl Atkinson. They did that from an apartment complex. You drive around with a laptop until you find an open port and you go in through there. So he was involved in the higher level of planning, but not necessarily the nitty gritty of getting the intelligence and getting it to the FBI people. That would be Henry, who would get it to the FBI.
Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions we have for now. We'll probably reach back out if we have some more specifics that we want to get cleared up. Thank you for your time today, and we'll be in contact.
Thank you. I appreciate it.